Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending our quantum computing roundtable. I am so excited about tonight. These gentlemen are awesome and they have a lot of information to provide to us in this conversation about quantum computing and where it is taking us. My name is Dr. Sharnita Rice. I am the CEO of Reassured Workforce Solution. And at Reassured Workforce Solution, we bridge the gap between cybersecurity and healthcare, delivering innovative solutions that protect patient data and medical devices while ensuring exceptional care through quality, compassionate support. Our vision is to provide unwavering support to healthcare providers, delivering exceptional care and safeguarding patient outcomes through quality, compassionate workforce solutions. Nikki.
Hello, my name is Nikia Kopney. I am the COO of Reassured Workforce Solutions. I am an entrepreneur by trade, and I am excited to be here tonight with these very knowledgeable gentlemen. I look forward to our webinar. Okay. We're going to have them to introduce themselves. So we'll start with Mark.
Thank you very much, Nikki. My name is Mark Bowling, and I am the Chief Risk, Security, and Information Security Officer at Extrahop Networks. We make network monitoring equipment, but this isn't a commercial, so I won't talk about it. Basically, I'm responsible if anything goes wrong at Extrahop. So sometimes I'm, get a little more inbound fire than I really am looking for. I'm also a PhD candidate in electrical engineering at the University of Arkansas, Fayetteville. And my specialty is not in quantum, but I am doing a lot in power engineering, and that power engineering does involve microcircuits and quantum characteristics of semiconductors. So I do have some other than work-related interest in this topic. Thank you very much, Nikki and Sharnita.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Bill? Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry. Glenn, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Glenn Schmitz. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I'm responsible for the information security of all patient information spanning 12 state-run hospitals all across the Commonwealth of Virginia, and including the central office here in Richmond, Virginia.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Bill, would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Bill Genovese. Hi, everybody. I am with a company called Kyndryl. Kyndryl is a former division of IBM, where I spent over a decade as a second-generation IBMer. And Kyndryl was formerly Global Technology Services. So we're one of the world's largest technology services and management companies. I am a consulting partner focused on financial services, okay, and advising CIOs and the C-suite. I'm a former CIO and CTO in 4 different companies. I've worked for KPMG twice, led corporate strategy at Huawei in China, where they had a quantum computer and simulator. So I've been working in this space for about 6 or 7 years now, and I'm also our global quantum services and consulting leader in Kyndryl.
Awesome. Amazing. Next, we'll have Cecil. Would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, certainly. Good afternoon and good evening, I think, for some of us, depending where you are in the country. I'm once again Cecil Newton. I'm the Chief Information Officer, and I'm also the Information Security Officer for a healthcare company, the Central California Alliance for Health. We have about 460,000 members here in Northern California. We're in about 5 counties. I'm responsible for everything IT related within our organization, and security as well. So I am also not a quantum computing expert, but know enough to be dangerous and know enough to be concerned about it. And so I think maybe to some degree I'll maybe play the protagonist role in terms of quantum computing and trying to figure out what the implications are for CIOs and CISOs to some degree in terms of what it might mean and what are some of the things we need to prepare for as this eventuality lays its wrath on us in the near future, I guess is the right way to put it, just to be funny. But yeah, that's what I do. And I also have a background in financial services. So I have been in IT for more than 20 years, actually a lot more than that. And so it'll be interesting to see how the impact of quantum computing will be on different industries. The reality is that we're all going to be affected in some way or another because the entire internet is dependent on encryption. So everything is going to be affected. So thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you guys so much for being here. We want to just take a break to give our call to action, and then we'll dive right into the questions, okay? So here at Reassure Workforce Solutions, we understand the unique challenges you face in protecting sensitive patient information and managing critical healthcare needs. Whether it's ensuring the safety of your data or addressing workforce shortages like nursing, these issues can feel overwhelming, but you're not alone. Our SELECT framework that stands for Streamline, Evaluate, Locate, Engage, Customize, and Transition was created with your needs in mind, offering customized solutions to fit your organization's specific challenges. We genuinely care about helping you build a secure, efficient operation that thrives. Let's talk about how we can support you, whether it's shoring up your cybersecurity or filling essential healthcare roles. Reach out to us at www.reassuredsolutions.com. We're here to help you succeed. And so we're going to dive into our first question. I'm going to present this question to Mark. The first question is, for those who aren't familiar, can you explain in simple terms what quantum computing is and how it's different from the computers we use today? Also, why should we care about this in cybersecurity?
So basically what quantum computing does, it allows you to compress from a size and a volume perspective and from a power usage perspective, the computational ability of your computing devices. So when you think of a normal computer, you have a bit, and that bit has two states, and that it's either a 1 or a 0. In quantum computing, you have what's called a qubit. Q, U, and then bit, dash bit. And the qubit has quantum characteristics that allows it to have multiple states. And so when you think about it, it can, instead of it being 1 bit with a 1 or a 0, you can have basically a 4x4 linear algebra matrix that captures all of the states that this 1 qubit can be in. So what that does is it allows you to compress your computational algorithms. Now the algorithms are more complex. Quantum algorithms are very complex, and so you have a different programming structure and a different programming style, and you actually need to architect your quantum computer so that what it does is it behaves, I'm going to say this wrong intentionally, but it behaves more like what we would consider to be a classical computer. Now, some of the physicists who are involved in this are saying that, well, all of our computers are quantum computers because they use semiconductors that may have multiple states, but everything still comes down to a 1 or a 0. And when everything comes down to a 1 or a 0 per bit, the qubit gives you much greater computational power, even though the algorithms are hence significantly more complicated. But for most of the people, what it means is a computer that takes this much size, you can compress into this much size. And so it's all about computational density. Quantum computing gives you a much higher computational density, which allows you to do more transactions faster.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
So our next question, we're going to go to Bill. So there's a lot of buzz around quantum computing. How can we tell the difference between genuine cybersecurity threats from quantum and overhyped risk that may not happen for a long time?
That's a very good question. And a lot of prognosticators and forecasters are, on one side of the equation calling for a 0-day doom event tomorrow. And then there's a lot of technology companies and pundits in the industry, experts that are kind of harnessing their views around 2030 as the day. Okay, more or less 0-day. That's the day where the big switch turns on and potentially a massive encryption or decryption event happens. So, the facts are in academia and research, the
Mhm.
the five vulnerable algorithms have been exposed. RSA's been cracked in limited scenarios and settings in terms of research. Okay, but nobody right now commercially has access to a quantum computer on a wide scale utility basis. Okay. I mean, that's definitively the truth. I mean, IBM, my former employer, has sold a quantum computer to the Cleveland Clinic, and they're up and getting that going, okay, on a private, lack of a better term, private entity basis. Um, my other opinion too, and a lot of others think this way too as well, if there is a breach or an attack or a situation like that, likely it will not happen on a single entity or enterprise basis. It'll be more widespread, very much like we saw with CrowdStrike and Microsoft. Okay, but that was tied back to also basic cybersecurity hygiene
Mm.
that lacked in terms of Windows OS upgrade. Okay, and then a vulnerability that was, surfaced between CrowdStrike and Microsoft. So more or less, a similar scenario can pop up. When exactly that will happen, we don't know. But, as the technology evolves and more encryption is exposed and determined that it can be broken, that event horizon, for lack of a better term, can come. Okay, what we have to look out for is, really the thinking or approach around store now, decrypt later.
Mhm.
Okay, we all have all heard of the Verizon breach, the Marriott hotels breach, and so on and so forth. We're all customers of these enterprises, and you wake up one morning or, once a week, whatever, with one eye open looking at your phone. Am I exposed now? Because I've been a Marriott Rewards member for 3 decades or whatever. And it doesn't happen. And you're wondering, well, when am I, potentially going to be impacted by this? Well, whoever has that data may be sitting on it, storing now and decrypting later when they can break the encryption. Okay. So once again, it could be, a cascading effect. In another example is what you see with the hyperscalers and content delivery networks. Okay, when they go down, not necessarily with a breach, but with an outage. Well, what happens when one of those goes down? For AWS, a quarter of the internet goes down. I mean, this is not something that happens every few years. I mean, it's happening more and more. Okay, so you get my feeling on this. It's going to be a cascading effect, and as the encryption becomes more pervasive to decrypt, it'll be higher impact and wider spread, I think. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that answer. This next question is going to be directed to Glenn. Glenn, quantum computing promises big things, but also comes with risks. What are some of the benefits it will bring, and what are the risks we need to be ready for?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I always like to start on a positive note. So we're going to talk about the positivity things that quantum can bring to us. And it's already been covered a bit, you know, that was talked on about the computational power and how it compresses that time and stuff down. Great thing about quantum computing is it can simulate a quantum world, if you will, where we can look at the folding of proteins, for example, for viruses, and that will help us come and find new medical procedures or pharmaceuticals to help us in patient care. We'll be able to simulate the quantum of manufacturing of new materials, aerodynamics for aircraft, for example. Also be able to solve the one problem that it seems that most people don't really realize, and that's the traveling salesman's problem. Whenever you talk about delivery of goods and services across a city, for example. And a great example of this, a colleague of mine and we spoke at IAC2 conference last week around the traveling salesman problem. And when you use a traditional classical computer, it comes out with, and this is in a very small town as an example, calculates out the optimized route for delivery. And then when you do the same thing with a quantum computer, it calculates it one much quicker, but also has a much better optimized route, saving about 11 kilometers. 11 kilometers don't sound like a lot, but when you scale that up to large cities, for example, say New York City or Los Angeles or London, that is a huge savings in both distance, time, and fuel costs. So those types of scenarios is going to be what's going to be great, what quantum computer is going to bring to us. And then touching on some of the stuff that that Bill and Mark have already talked on from the, I guess, the risk that it's going to bring to us in cybersecurity. Talked about Q-Day. Whenever the quantum computers are strong enough to crack our encryption, and that's going to spell a lot of, I would say, doom and gloom, if you will. And it's something that we in cybersecurity really needs, I think, really need to start being mindful of and start looking into. Where do we start with that? Because when you talk about encryption, we're not talking just about encryption of our data at rest. And Bill kind of mentioned this as well around, our data as it transits and how we look at all things across the internet, and really taking an inventory, a crypto inventory of where all of our encryption's at. Make sure that you look at your VPNs, your certificates, and just about everything we deal with has encryption into it, because we have gotten very good at encrypting our data, because we know if it gets intercepted, it can be vulnerable. The one thing that is, I think, of top of mind that was mentioned by Bill is that harvest now, decrypt later scenario. That piece scares me the most. We've seen a lot of ransomware attacks against us. I think we'll start seeing more and more of exfiltration attacks, where they're going to be hitting the long shelf life data, like patient information, financial information, the intellectual property of companies that, again, has long shelf life, because our adversaries will take that and hold on to it until the commercial availability of quantum becomes available, and it's powerful enough to run Shor's algorithm that will decrypt all that information. That one, I think, is going to be hard for us to really solve. We have to get in front of that now as opposed to later. And there's new standards that have come out from NIST around encryption that is post-quantum safe. So we really need to take a really close look at our inventory of our crypto, do a risk assessment of those that are most important to our organizations, and then start looking at implementation of these post-quantum safe encryption standards and start putting those in place sooner rather than later. It was mentioned earlier that we're looking at around the year 2030 when Q-Day could possibly arise on us. The US government has put out a mandate of 2035 to be post-quantum safe. And the research that I've looked at and the things that I've been starting to go down, it seems like we have about 10 to 12 years of work ahead of us, and we have about 8 to 10 years before that Q day happens. Now that shifts quite a bit. So we need to really start looking at how do we get in front of this today and prepare for that eventuality tomorrow.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. That's on the same, kind of on the same lines as my next question for Cecil. So based off what Glenn said, and this question, quantum computing could eventually break the encryption we use today. How soon do you think this could happen? And what steps can companies start doing now to prepare for this shift to post-quantum cryptography? And how urgent is it for us to take action? And I know
Yeah,
your role is the CIO, so.
yeah. It's a good question, is one that I've thought about. I'm going to take sort of the protagonist sort of approach to this. And I generally agree with everything that's been said by Bill, Glenn, and Mark. But there's a little bit of fear and certainty and doubt in all of this. And some vendors are out there taking advantage of that and scaring companies and CIOs like myself into trying to prepare. I think the first thing is obviously get educated, sort of like what we're doing here today for folks to get an understanding of what the implications of this might be. I think the likelihood that everything is going to be decrypted on some date is probably highly unlikely. First of all, quantum computing certainly is coming, but it's really expensive right now, incredibly expensive. And if it's going to become something that's more pervasive, it's probably going to start with nation states because they have the resources and the money to be able to afford a quantum computer. They're also not stable yet. That's the other thing. You need a certain amount of energy. I understand you need cooling, you need helium, and all these kinds of things. So it's not going to be, I think, as pervasive as maybe some vendors would like us to believe. I think the one challenge is the one that Glenn mentioned and Bill alluded to, which is to store and decrypt later. So we know there's breaches virtually every day of some data of some type. It's not all getting decrypted, but that data has been stored somewhere. These hackers are not, or these ransomware actors are not giving that data back. They're not destroying it. They're not deleting it, despite what they might say when you pay them a ransom. And so that is a danger. And so for some of this data that has an infinite shelf life, yeah, that data is going to be compromised. And there's not much we can do about that. That data is already out there in the wild. And these ransomware actors are going to take advantage of that in some way. And so I don't know what the solution for that will be. There are new encryption methods coming out that I think will mitigate some of this, but the reality is there's significant risk out there. The question is when. I've heard different dates bandied about as to when quantum computing will be available on a wider scale. It's hard to say at this point because it is so expensive. Like any technology, though, the pricing will come down. Is it 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? I actually don't know. But at this point, I think all we can do is make sure, first of all, that your cybersecurity in general is up to snuff, and you're doing at least all of the basics to protect your organization from any breaches. Just get educated as to what the implications might be. Like with anything else, you can't close all the doors. And if it is worst case where existing encryption methodology are compromised in some way, there's not a lot you're going to be able to do in the short term. In the longer term, yeah, you're going to have to start using some of these more secure encryption methods that are still being developed, and you might protect yourself from some of the future implications. But if you have PHI, like most healthcare related organizations have, and you've been compromised, that data is already out there. There's not a lot you're going to be able to do about it. That's just the reality.
Yeah, can I add some color? Based on we recently, my company just recently signed a collaborative agreement, our R&D group, with the University of Waterloo. Some of my colleagues here, Mark, Cecil, Glenn, you may heard the name Michelle Mosca, Dr. Michelle Mosca, well-renowned cybersecurity researcher. Her theorem is there's a 1 in 7 chance that some fundamental public key cryptography algorithm will be broken by quantum by 2026. It's already kind of happened. Okay. and a 1 in 2 chance of the same by 2031. So this kind of aligns with what all of our colleagues are saying here right now. I mean, organizations have to start preparing. Okay, RSA, ECC, and the last one that's no longer secure is finite field cryptography, DSA. Okay, the others are SHA-2, SHA-3, and AES, but there's workarounds there in terms of key length and configuration for hashing and things of that nature. But it's the three that I mentioned that also ties to what Moscow's theorem is. Okay, and if you kind of layer that in against critical digital services across all industries touching network, applications, data, and infrastructure, that's alarming. So,
Wow.
Wow, thank you so much for that. I appreciate your input. So my next question is going to be directed towards Mark. Mark, how do you see quantum computing working together with AI and machine learning in areas like cybersecurity? Could quantum computing help improve how we process and protect data? Also, AI and machine learning uses a lot of energy. Could quantum computing help reduce these energy demands while still boosting processing power?
Yeah, let me take the second one first, because I want to really hit where are some of the values and where are some of the benefits that quantum computing will bring to the world and to the American people. Right now, and I'm just going to speak about generative AI and foundational AI in general, they are creating a massive electrical power drain, to the point where you have individual data center owners like Google and AWS who are talking about having near site, not on site, but near site small nuclear reactors, SMRs, small modular reactors, powering their data centers because there's not enough electricity. Places like California, in many parts of the country where we have seasonal brownouts. And so the need for electrical power for both the computational activities as well as the air conditioning, the environmental system management, is just driving up the demand for electrical power. And this is driven by generative and foundational AI. So what we're seeing is that because of AI and the utilization of AI, and I hate that term, I'd rather say machine learning and large models, large informational models, but because of what is commonly referenced by marketeers as AI, we see a huge cost in electrical power. Well, one of the promises of quantum computing is that we can shrink that. So instead of, and I want you to think of back in the beginning of the Cold War, right after World War II, you had these massive computers, and bit for bit, they were made up of vacuum tubes. And you think about the power, 8-bit computers, literally 8-bit computers that took up whole rooms. And you think of that power is now compressed into my watch, my Apple Watch right here, probably to 3 or 4 orders of magnitude. Well, what we will see is quantum computing will allow us to compress that power usage, reduce that power usage because of density compression. And when you have that density compression, you will drive down power costs. And if you drive down power costs, you will also impact things like greenhouse gases. You will also impact things like the need to transport large amounts of fossil fuels. And so I think that is a good thing. Now, to talk about, let's go to the first part of your question, is what are some of the things that you will get? And I'm just going to use an example that Glenn and I are familiar with. And I'm going to talk about what's called the intelligence cycle. And so you start with data up here, and I want you to think of a big, big region of data. And data in context becomes information. And you get that information because of structuring. You have a bunch of letters, they become words. You have a bunch of words, they become sentences. So you take all that data, and where AI is super valuable is taking all that data and compressing it into information. And then you decide what information is valuable, that becomes knowledge. And then you decide what knowledge allows me to make a decision, that becomes intelligence. And then if there's a specific action you can take based on that intelligence, then you have this little bitty amount of what's known as actionable intelligence. And so you start with all this huge amount of information. Now, as you go from data down to actionable intelligence, you start with what's called unsupervised learning, because everything is parameterized. But as you move down, you have more and more what we call supervised learning, where the machine learning is now supervised and governed by humans who are training the learning models. Up here, where you're going from large amounts of structured data and you're parameterizing it, when you get data and information, unsupervised learning works. And those large language models and large information models are perfect for that. But as you take all of this huge amount of data, that's a lot of data points. That's a lot of computational power. Unstructured or unsupervised learning is incredibly costly from an energy and computational perspective. So as you get to better learning models and a higher level of supervised learning, then quantum allows you to process all of these things faster. And Glenn actually did a great job discussing protein chains for chemotherapy. I'm 6 years into cancer, and so I love to see these gene therapies that come out based on an understanding of an individual person's genetics. Mm-hmm. And so instead of saying, hey, this is the chemo that works for all leukemia patients, what they say is this chemo might work for all of these 23 chromosomes that Mark Bowling has. And so that's another place where you see all of this information, amino acids, suddenly becomes a very, very complex genetic code. And then we can laser guide our chemotherapy treatments for a specific genetic code. Did I answer both of those questions for you, Nikki?
Yeah, I'd like to add on just real quick, Mark, and you made a great point there. We're going to see a change in generalized medicine to more of a specific and personalized medicine approach. And quantum computing holds great promise in that. Again, when is it going to get here? Yeah, that's the big question. And it was mentioned earlier around the error that qubits have in them today. I think IBM is currently at a 1,000 qubit processor, but they've kind of paused on moving forward with larger qubit processors to address the error correction problem. Right. And once we get the error correction done, then we'll start seeing that takeoff of increased qubit processors and larger processing power of the quantum computer.
And to maintain the superposition state and entanglement. And to what you talked about earlier, Mark, and what you're adding to here, in classical, the rule set for unsupervised, going to supervised, is based on binary rules in terms of computation, 0 or 1. With qubits and entanglement, as long as that state is stable, okay, that optimization net widens. Okay, and so you can accelerate the computation and move to supervised in terms of pattern recognition as well, which is a definitive benefit while gaining the benefits of compression. So
yeah, what we do in computation is we take a reality system, which is an analog system fundamentally, and we pattern that analog system as a binary system, as a digital system. Well, if you start with a system that is almost analog, the qubit is an analog system with multiple states, and some of those states are fuzzy.
Right, exactly.
Decoherence, where is this one of these 16 states? Is it A or B, or is it kind of are we guessing between the two?
Yeah.
And that behaves a whole lot more like our proteins than the classical digital computer does.
That same use case, well, not same exactly, but similar use case in terms of portfolio optimization
Yep.
in financial services, alternative investments that are not part of traditional asset classes, and different states of return and risk reward, so also a benefit of quantum we're touching on. Yep.
Yeah, I love this discussion, and it brings up a really good point between the use of classical computers and quantum computing, and in that, yeah, it was mentioned earlier, quantum is extremely expensive, and we'll start seeing more and more of quantum as a service. And we still have a need for our classical computers because they're really good at doing certain things that quantum computers would not be good at. And there's certain things that quantum computers are extremely good at that our classical computers can't do. So we'll see as a hybrid approach to this, where our classical computers will start doing a process, get to a point that needs to hand off to quantum to do that for us, and then hand back to our classical. And that kind of bridges that gap that was mentioned earlier about how expensive quantum really is. That's going to be quantum as a service. And there are already some quantum as a service out there, not at the commercial scale, but at the personal level, you can go to IBM or to AWS and you can have access to quantum computers to do very simple tasks. But in the future, as quantum becomes more and more advanced and available, I think that's where we need to be very aware of what our adversaries are going to do. When I say that, we've been hit so much with ransomware. Who has the money to spend for quantum as a service? Our adversaries. And we've been funding that because we've been paying ransom. So it's going to be a shift in, not just the protection of the data, but also being able to combat the future funding of this quantum as a service for adversaries to use against us.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. I love that. I love the conversation. So this question is for Bill, and it's about like the human factor and workforce readiness. So even with better encryption, humans make mistakes or social engineering attacks remain a big issue. How can companies tackle these human factors while also preparing for a quantum ready future? And how can we close the knowledge gap and train cybersecurity professionals to handle the changes and challenges that quantum will bring?
Yeah, our position with our security and resiliency group that I'm working very, very closely with on our quantum safe offering, we have a pretty robust, mature offering around zero trust posture. Okay.
Mhm.
In preparing organizations, assessing where they are in terms of the maturity there along that path, but then continuing that journey. Now, the decryption event or potential decryption event will not happen in the back end of the data center necessarily where the mainframe is with a quantum computer. It's going to happen along the 7 layers of the network, the OSI model representation. That ties directly to the posture and maturity and evolution of zero trust. So cybersecurity professionals who have already kind of started that journey in their companies with CISOs along zero trust and preparing the organization from outside in attacks, okay, and shoring that up in terms of basic hygiene will be better prepared. And that's really where we're seeing the alignment point to continue. Okay. And then layering in from a vulnerability perspective, critical services, mid-tier services, and then, not so critical services, okay, along that zero trust preparation in terms of vulnerability and remediation. So,
Yeah, if I could add to that, I think that the ability to educate people about cybersecurity is certainly important, but there's definite limitations to that. Some of some of the attacks that I'm starting to see now, we're starting to see, are very, very difficult for a human to discern from a legitimate request. And so I think at some point in the future, we're going to be increasingly dependent on our technologies to discern whether something is legitimate or not. You can't leave it up to a human to determine. It's becoming impossible for them to do that now. So training certainly of your workforce is really important. That needs to continue. But at some point, you have to be dependent on the technology to protect you from other technology.
Yeah.
If I
Awesome. Awesome.
like
Go
to
ahead.
add
Go ahead.
Bill was just saying about, where that the decryption is going to happen, and I think he's spot on that it's not going to be a super attack against our data centers. It's going to be the kind of a man in the middle type attack. It's going to happen in transit as our data is traversing the internet. And the thing about this is that we have no way to detect that at this point, right? Once they intercept that data and they can decrypt it, there's no way to tell if it has or hasn't been. And I think that's the big fear that I have is that, we won't know until someone tells us that they've intercepted our data. And that's quite of a scary thought when you really think about it.
And that is one of the problems with quantum computing is that when that happens, you really don't have an internet because everything is based on the ability to encrypt traffic. And if it can't be encrypted or if it can't be transmitted in a safe way, then you really don't have an internet. Everything is compromised. And so that is the big danger with quantum computing is when stuff is decrypted and breached, you won't even know.
Yeah, the remediation though, we're kind of focused in this discussion on the compute layer in terms of quantum, but there's the whole communication aspect and the network too, where the benefits are. Optical networks, quantum key distribution. Okay, and we're seeing a tremendous amount of client interest in network modernization. Okay, and also working with content delivery networks. And Nokia, as an example, is advertising and commercializing their new network gear as quantum safe with encryption. Okay, and other providers are putting in or offering optical networks as well. Okay, and it kind of goes back to the days, if you remember, with HTTPS and data center to data center, as long as you secure the perimeters, data center to data center, but then you have to worry about the data and transfer between them two, and that's kind of where QKD comes in the optical networks too, with that piece. So, we look at it holistically. It's not just compute, it's got to extend to the network. Okay.
Sure.
And, then we're going to have to look at databases and devices and routers and everything else. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So our next question is going to be directed to Cecil. So with new post-quantum cryptography systems being developed, how can we make sure that different solutions work together smoothly and that there are clear standards for everyone to follow? And also, encryption is a big concern, but what other areas of cybersecurity could quantum computing affect, like verifying digital signatures or authentication systems?
Yeah, that's a lot of question there. There's a lot of content there. I think I don't know that we can really be fully prepared because we don't know exactly what's going to happen. All we can really do is get to better encryption methods that maybe are longer, more complex. The one of the things is I think we're going to have to change. Like for example, one of the things that we're looking at now is how viable is our certificate methodologies today? Today, when we purchase certificates, they maybe use them for a year, maybe even 2 years. We may be looking at a situation where we need to change our certificates on a weekly basis just to avoid the fact that the encryption in those certificates could be compromised. And so I think it's one of those things where you've just got to kind of make it up as you go along and try to figure out where things are evolving to and react to it. It's a tough question to answer. I don't know you can fully prepare for this, to be honest with you. We're looking at our certificate authorities, what they're doing, how they're building their certificates, how they're managing them, how we're going to manage them. We're looking at all of the network stuff, all of our network gear, making sure that all of our vendors are going to be quantum safe at some point in the near future. We're using vendors like Cato with SASE protections, who can validate that the information that we're getting is a legitimate information and not compromised. We're going to rely on our vendors to make sure that they're quantum safe. And then at some point, we'll make sure that they've gone through some sort of certification process, that they're NIST compliant or some other sort of agreed upon protocol. But there's no absolute answers to this, at least as far as we can tell. So.
So I like to add on that Cecil hit on something very important, I think, talking about key links and things. I see the key link as being kind of the last resort as quantum comes online. If it cracks RSA 256, for example, our standard across the internet, what's the next best thing if we're not ready to replace that standard? That's increase your crypto key link, and that will buy you some time.
By some time.
Quantum computing continues to evolve and become more mature and faster, then that will be able to crack that key. So that's just kind of a last resort type approach. I think Cecil made a good point. What is the standard going to be? NIST has released, 3 crypto standards, Crystals Kyber, Crystals Dilithium, and Sphinx Plus. And that's for certificates and encapsulation and signature and encapsulation. So there's standards there today, but the key to remember is, well, how long are they going to be good for? RSA is with us a long time. I have the feeling that with quantum, that these standards will not be with us for a long time. They'll continue to evolve. New algorithms will be developed. And we really need to take again, a hard look at our crypto inventory and have that inventory, and it becomes an asset management problem at that point. And then be able to understand where things at. So when we do have to change, we're able to do that very quickly. And that kind of leads into crypto agility and being able to change very quickly, because once they're cracked, we're very vulnerable, and we need to.
I would like to add to what you both said, and it kind of rings the memory banks in my head in terms of what is old is what's new again. If you remember the ISACA framework of CIA, confidentiality, integrity, availability.
Yeah.
We're kind of blowing the dust off this a little bit and reintroducing this in terms of quantum safe, in terms of services. Okay, because if there's an attack or a decryption event, it's going to happen along those vectors in terms of confidentiality, integrity, data at transfer and at rest, and then availability. So your services, if they're ultra critical, touching all 7 layers of the network, applications, data, and infrastructure, 111 service, your PQC from a referential architecture perspective has to cover all of those bases. Certificates is one piece or component of that, right?
And at some point, all vendors will have to be quantum safe certified in some way.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they won't be able to compete in the marketplace.
And Cecil, to that point, that's one of the things that I always talk with vendors of new solutions coming to my environment. I ask them, what is your roadmap to become quantum safe?
Mm-hmm.
And some of the answers vary from, yeah, it's on our roadmap, we're working towards that, to, oh, that's a good thing to think about. And then they come back to me later and say, yeah, we're researching it or whatnot. I think the more that we as cybersecurity professionals talk about it with the vendors, the more apt they're going to be to start looking at that long and hard and say, yes, we're going to be quantum safe by X date, whatever that looks like. Again, NIST, the standards are there. The government, the U.S. government has put out a mandate by 2035. All government systems need to be quantum safe. So I think we're starting to see that to gain some momentum now. And it goes back to what we've been talking about from the beginning, the education piece, educating, not just the cyber professionals, but the COOs, the CEOs, the CFOs out there. These are the things we need to start thinking about now and holding our vendors to that, so that we can ensure safety and security of all of our information.
All right. Well, thank you guys for that. So we have two more questions that we want to try to get in. For our attendees, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A so we can try to get to them before we're done. So Glenn, this question is for you. As quantum computing develops, especially with nation states investing heavily in it, what are the major cybersecurity risks we should be worried about? And how can the nation states work together to make sure we're all secure as we move into the post-quantum cryptography world, and what new regulations may be needed?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And when we talk about nation states and we're talking about near peer adversaries working against us, to put in perspective the amount of money that is being invested by these nation states, the U.S. Currently we've invested about $5 billion into this technology. The EU is investing $7 billion, and China has invested $15 billion as part of their 5-year plan. So that kind of puts in perspective that quantum is here and it's here to stay. And these large nations are investing heavily in that. The question now becomes, why are they investing so heavily in that? I see it as almost an arms race. Whoever gets to the computing power of quantum the fastest and is able to get Shor's algorithm to crack the encryption piece, they're going to own everything. And that is something that we really need to start looking at and working towards, not just as individual companies, but as a united front against that, because it's everything that's at risk, not just my information from my hospitals. We're talking everything across the board, financials, Department of Defense secrets, the things that make our world run will now be at risk.
Yeah,
And
no doubt about it. Yeah.
I mean, that's the gravity of this situation.
And let's be frank. 21st century warfare is cyber warfare.
Yes.
When countries go to war now, the first thing they do is they attack you from a cybersecurity standpoint and try to take down your infrastructure, your water, your electricity, all the things that keep your society whole, functioning. Those are the things that get attacked first. So those are all the precursors to all-out warfare. I read a book not too long ago called Wired for War. And one of the first, I don't know if you read that book, it's been around for a while, maybe 10 years. And one of the first things that nation states do is they try to look for vulnerabilities in your infrastructure, because they know that if they can cripple that, then they have an advantage going in.
And see, that's a great point. And yeah, Wired for War is an amazing book. Highly recommend. It is about 10 years old, but it has so much relevance in what we're talking about today. And one of the things, and I had a conversation when I was still in the Air Force. I was part of the cyber defense team that was putting together cyber defense for the Air Force, and had a meeting out in Colorado Springs and was talking with an advisor from Google at the time. And during lunch, we talked about the future of warfare and what that's really going to look like. And think of a future where you no longer have to deploy bombers, send missiles, or send troops on the ground, but rather you attack the infrastructure, like you said, but not just attack it, but hold it hostage. What if they turn off the water for, say, Miami, or they turn off the water supply for New York, or the electrical grid gets hit for a large city? You're going to have complete civil unrest. And the country's going to tear itself apart from the inside, because now the citizens don't have trust in their own government. And we're starting to see that now with disinformation and whatnot. So this is a real big problem. I don't want to get too far away from what we're talking about around the quantum piece, but those are the things that the real risk that we run with nation states. So I think I've answered the question. How do we prepare for that? I think we've already talked about that quite a bit. I would say, really start doing your crypto inventory, be ready for crypto agility, be able to plug and play new crypto standards when they come into the environment, and really take a long, hard look at your vendors and make sure they have a roadmap and really understand your risk within your organization. Because we're not going to be able to tackle this, have it, fully implemented in a day. TLS 1.0, right? I still find stuff in my environment that is TLS enabled, TLS 1.0 enabled. I found some of my websites that run on 1.0 that was deprecated many years ago,
Yeah.
and is still out there. So it's going to take us a while to get completely safe. And the scary part is that if we are compromised, like I mentioned earlier, we have no indication for that. We have really good intrusion detection systems and things from a classical sense, but in this era that's coming at us, it's going to be completely different.
Okay.
Could I just dovetail on that, please, Sharnita?
Yes, you can.
There's a very specific standard. It's called a FIPS 140. And FIPS 140 sets the encryption standard for what are known as encryption modules that are both hardware and software. If you have a piece of software, you have a piece of equipment that's still on 140-2, it is not even what we would consider quantum resistant. So NIST published 140-3, which is considered to be quantum resistant. So as you know, as Glenn said, you want to talk to your vendors. Ask them the question, are you 140, FIPS 140-2 or 140-3? But I will guarantee everybody on this call, we will have 140-4 that will not be quantum resistant, but it will be quantum safe as much as it can, given the computational power that we can currently comprehend.
Right.
Simple question, are you 140-2 or 140-3? And if they don't know what FIPS 140-2 means, you need to find another vendor.
Find another vendor.
Well, the other question that we were going to ask, I think you guys answered it, which was how can companies start addressing this threat today? I think you kind of answered that with that. So at this point, we don't want to hold people over an hour. I want to let Nikki come in right now and do the Q&A.
Yes. So we have, well, I'm going to do our call to action, and then I'll ask to do our quick Q&A question, and then we'll be done. So again, at Reassured Workforce Solutions, we understand the unique challenges you face in protecting sensitive patient information and managing critical healthcare needs. Whether it's ensuring the safety of your data or addressing workforce shortages like nursing, these issues can feel overwhelming, but you are not alone. Our SELECT framework, SELECT stands for Streamline, Evaluate, Locate, Engage, Customize, and Transition, was created with your needs in mind, offering customized solutions to fit your organization's specific challenges. We genuinely care about helping you build a secure, efficient operation that thrives. Let's talk about how we can support you, whether it's shoring up your cybersecurity or filling essential healthcare roles. Reach out to us at www.reassuredsolutions.com. We're here to help you succeed. And so we had one question for our Q&A, and it was from Max. And Max said, what about the risk of attacks to the quantum computing infrastructure itself? These tools are employing new code and new code architectures that won't benefit from the code review and vulnerability management that the industry has developed. How are we going to vet and maintain novel code bases and the quantum systems themselves? And I'll just throw that out there for anybody that wants to answer it.
I mean, I'll start and then I'll let the other guys take over. But, basically, I think with any computer system, quantum or otherwise, you've got to be doing the basics. Very often what I find when I'm talking to other companies and we're engaging them in some sort of relationship is that from a security standpoint, they haven't done the basics. Good firewall rules, MFA, SSL, all those kinds of things that you would expect to see from a security standpoint. I don't think they're any different for quantum computing. You've got to have the same sort of at least basics in place, or your hygiene, as Bill said, around your computer systems. And so when I'm talking to companies, I make sure we do an assessment. We look at their security profile. We have some other tools we use to make sure they're even doing the basics. So I think all of those things will apply to quantum computing as well. And I'll hand it off to the other guys.
Yeah, we're positioning, what we're calling a QORA, which is, for lack of a better term, a due diligence assessment along those lines, Cecil. I mean, we'll go in and we'll look at operations. We'll look at all of the dimensions of architecture, operational architecture, security architecture, infrastructure, applications, DevSecOps, okay, to assess the baseline maturity of the organization to see where they are before they embark down the road of quantum, either from a quantum safe perspective to because they're fearful and they need to swap out encryption, or they're exploring the business benefit side in terms of the applications. I came up through the ranks before I was CIO and CTO as an architect. Okay. So, I mean, I live and breathe enterprise architecture and all the layers of it. So I take that discipline in. And to your point, following that same evolution, you've got to look at it through a multidimensional lens of architecture of existing where we are now. Okay, and it's going to evolve in terms of a hybrid to the quantum world. I don't think it's going to be a big bang, rip and replace, and we're going to wake up one day and everything's quantum. It's going to be evolutionary. So,
Would anyone else like to add to that?
Yeah, I just, my background before I kind of went into the CISO world was with the FBI and naval intelligence. And I think one thing we have to really pay attention to is what I would call the human threat factor here. And the human threat factor is going to be easily manipulated, but we'll also see our adversaries enhanced. So right now we look at the threat and we see near peer powers that Glenn talked about, and we see mid-tier powers. But if you have the ability to access quantum computing online, what you can do is you can write really bad code and put it into a Gen AI system and get out pretty good code. So now a script kiddie who did not have the ability to attack OT systems, operational technology systems, now has what I would call a moderate ability to attack OT systems. Well, with quantum and with more advanced generative AI and foundational AI, these script kiddies are going to be at the same level of threat where we currently see mid-tier powers.
Today.
So what they're doing is they're increasing the rate at which our adversaries become sophisticated, and then we're also increasing the rate at which damage will be done once those adversaries get some access.
right.
And so now we're seeing script kiddies become as dangerous as low-tier powers, second-rate terrorist organizations. But the human factor here is that maybe we can use quantum and use generative AI and some of these tools to make our organization more robust. We can do data audits using generative AI. Find out where's all that data out there that's not protected inside our corporate environment. And so these are some of the ideas that where we can get better ourselves using some of these tools, because I guarantee everybody on this call that the bad guys are getting better, and they're getting better fast because these tools are very dynamic.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll just add to that just real quick. And I think that, Cecil hit it, do the fundamental things first. And then as things continue to develop, there's vulnerabilities that we can't anticipate. And especially in the quantum, and as we encounter those, then we'll put more safeguards in place. I do know that the state of Maryland had put out a call around network security for quantum to quantum, which I find that very interesting. So they're already starting to look at, when we network quantum computers together, what type of network security do we put in place?
Yeah.
And I've talked with some other colleagues and stuff that they're doing quantum hackathons. So this has already started from a perspective of we're still approaching this from a traditional computer sense, but I think that's where we have to start from, because a lot of this is going to be hybrid. Not everybody's going to be able to afford a quantum computer, but they will be able to afford time on that quantum computer. And so we got to get the security correct on our classical computers that interact with those, and then apply the same principles to the quantum realm. So I think it's going to be an iterative process as we do move forward in that.
Right. Well, I love this conversation. We can go on, and you all know that. But I just want to say thank you all so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be panelists on this round table. I love the conversation, and I really want to thank our attendees for taking time out of their day to come.
Yes,
We're
thank
going
you,
to end
guys.
here. We will definitely continue reaching out because we definitely want to stay connected with you guys.
Thank
Is
you.
there, before we end, is there anything pressing that you all feel like the world needs to know about quantum that we did not cover? And then we'll let that be the last
I
comment.
would say it won't make your coffee in the morning for you quite yet.
Oh, shucks, Bill.
Darn it.
It's pretty
But
cool.
thank you guys
Thank you
so
all.
much. I really, really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks, everyone.
thank you.
Thank
You
you
all
all.
have a wonderful
Thank you all
night.
very much.
Bye-bye.
Have a great night.